This next story comes to us from one of our viewers. When he was an 11-year-old boy, he had a frightening experience. He said it haunts him to this day. That's next. Okay, so I am in the studio tonight. It is a rainy, windy night. It's been rainy and windy this week. It's been awesome though. I love that. We need that in the Northern Sierra here. And for tonight's beer, got kind of a special here. We have from the Jeremiah Johnson Brewing Company. We have a Honey Weizen, and this is brewed in Montana. Jeremiah Johnson is one of my favorite movies of all time. 1972, Robert Redford, Mountain Man in the Northern Rockies. I love it. It's great stuff. And I got a beer from Jeremiah Johnson himself. So. It's kind of fun being back in the old studio here. Did this last winter, so yeah, look at that. Honey Weizen. And this is like a fake fireplace. That is really good. Cheers, late cheers. So this story comes to us from one of our viewers. His name is Dave. Dave grew up in East Texas. In 1971, he was 11 years old. And that fall, his father wanted to take him deer hunting. He's only 11 years old. This is Texas. That's how they do things down there. And they went west of Groverton near Westville. That's where he grew up. And they were just outside of the Davy Crockett National Forest. 160,000 acres of rolling hills, oak, pines, streams, thick forests. Really vast country there when you look at East Texas and how big it is and the forests are there. And his father was going to have him go up in this tree stand early in the morning in November and wait for him as he flushed some deer his direction and hopefully to get a shot. He was sitting up in this deer stand, tree stand, had a .410 shotgun across his lap, single shot, and this is what they do in the thicker forests in the east part of Texas anyways, as opposed to a 30-06 out west where you have these long range shots that you need to take if you're hunting elk or deer. And in the forest, when it's thick, you don't need to have a long range shot. You're talking 25, 45, 50 yards or so. And so you can have slugs, buckshot, whatever. You guys know more about this than I do. But he had this .410 shotgun. He's sitting there waiting for the sun to come up. It's about 50 degrees, nice cool morning. The forest is starting to come alive. And he hears behind this oak tree that he's sitting up next to in this tree stand, some loud footsteps coming towards him, right towards his stand. And he can hear it clearly in the leaves. And he's thinking, whoever this hunter is, he's not making really much of an attempt to be quiet because it's hunting season. And he also noticed these footfalls were really loud. So whatever this thing was, whoever this thing was, this hunter, it sounded large. And it was coming closer and closer to a stand. And then it stopped about 4 o'clock. This is noon or 12. This would be about 4 o'clock. It stopped about 15 feet behind him. Just suddenly stopped. And it was quiet. And he's sitting there up in this tree stand, and he slowly turns his head, and out of the peripheral vision, he sees this 6 feet tall, fully hairy covered form just standing there, not making a sound. Immediately, he felt this fear come over him. He's 11 years old. And this numbness pervade his body. There's just numb sensation. He'd never heard of Bigfoot. His father never warned him about anything. All he knew was there was deer and other animals, nothing major. There's no major wildlife there like grizzly bears or mountain lions or Bigfoot. As he's sitting there, feeling this terror in his body, he could see in the morning light that it was this chocolate reddish brown, very muscular, very tall. The head was proportionally, seemed very small to its body, and it didn't seem like it even had a neck. It was backlit, so he couldn't see the face. It was in shadow, but it didn't have a snout. It wasn't a bear. It was upright. It was standing on 2 feet, and it was huge. He couldn't grasp what he was seeing. It was just, nothing prepared him for this moment, what he was going through. He said the sensation was so strong, this numbing sensation, that he almost fainted. Crazy. And he's sitting there, and he's just like motionless. It's almost like a fight or flight kind of thing, where you're not fighting, you're not in flight, but you're in the middle, just trying to go undetected, like this motionless, like just trying to survive. And that's what fight or flight is. You're trying to survive somehow. Somehow he got his composure, and he listened, and he could hear this thing breathing, or what he thought was breathing. It turned out, he was assuming here, that it was trying to catch his scent, because he could hear it inhale through the nose, like like that. And it was trying to pick up his scent because it sensed something wasn't right. That's why it stopped. Again, he sat there just motionless, just waiting to see what this thing was going to do. And then it let out this kind of a exhale, snort. And Dave said it almost like it was disgusted by his presence. And it turned and walked to the southwest. And he could hear it walking just like it came in, loudly through the forest, on the leaves, and went into the brush, and he could hear it fading away. And he felt some relief hearing that it was gone, but he still had this numbing sensation pervading his body. Minutes later, in front of him, he heard his father coming through the forest, and then his father whistled for him. That was their signal. And he felt some relief that his father was there. He comes out of the brush, and then Dave comes down, and he didn't mention anything to his father. He just didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to describe it. He didn't know what his father would say. He had never heard of this before. And so he didn't say a word. 1972, he sees the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek, about the documentary style horror movie about the folk monster up in Arkansas, in the swamp and bayou there. And after seeing that and having this experience, he said he never hunted again. Dave said he tried to revisit this spot years later. It was posted, no hunting, no trespassing, so he wasn't able to go back there. Really interesting. He said his father was about 6 feet tall, and he was trying to figure out how big this thing was. And he said it was well over 6 feet tall, very muscular. And he said he used to go to the San Diego Chargers training camp, and he saw the NFL Hall of Famer linebacker Junior Seau. And Junior Seau's 6'3", he passed away, and very muscular. And this thing that he saw when he was 11 years old reminded him of something like that, like Junior Seau, but bigger and hairy, obviously. But that was the picture they had, this like bodybuilder, strong, hulking being standing there. And this thing had haunted him for years. Dave said he had been in most likely some kind of a shock after going through this, and for like years, and he'd repressed some of these memories. This seems to be like a common thing for many people as they go through this encounter, this experience, and then there's kind of this disbelief or shock, and then there's this fear, or this where they change their lives, they don't hunt anymore, they camp differently, they spend less time in the outdoors, they might repress it, and then something will trigger it, and they might have nightmares, and even wanting to learn about it and bring the memory back somehow, and just try to understand it. And I've never been through this. I've heard things in the forest late at night, kind of some scary things, but it hasn't affected me long term. But for some people, it really haunts them. So Dave, back in 2000, was on this long distance run to raise money for some Native American causes, and he was with some other runners, and they were in southern Colorado, and they heard some vocalizations in the forest. And I don't know the details, he didn't give me the details, but it triggered this again, and he told some of these runners what he had experienced, and thinking maybe it was the same thing. He also took this, what he heard in Colorado, to the BFRO, which is Bigfoot Research Organization, sent them his story about what he'd heard. He apparently didn't hear anything back. He was disappointed by that. But it gave him this courage to talk to some close members of his family and some close friends. And again, he didn't give me any details about that, but I'm assuming, because he didn't, that it went positively, it went well, or well enough, and he didn't get ridiculed or laughed at or anything like that. But this has really haunted him, and he felt really good about finally talking about it. And then he spent some time learning and reading books and looking at things like my YouTube channel and other people's channels, and trying to see other people's experiences. And this is another part of this, at least from what I'm learning. You guys could tell me too. Some of you people have had things happen, but you want to understand possibly what you experience and know more about it, and hear other people's experience and what was that like for them and what are they going through. It's really interesting. Makes sense, you know. There's this repression, there's this not wanting to move away from it and not experience it anymore, and then years later you want to try to understand it. He also mentioned that in 2011 his father asked him to move back to Westville, Texas, near Groverton, somewhere in that area, and help with his land and some cattle. And he actually moved back there with his father, back to right this area where he had this experience. And he said his experience came back and was more vivid for him by doing that, by being in that place again. It just was vivid. Now, he didn't mention dreams or nightmares, but it was just really clear what happened. He also mentioned that his father had a friend in 2016 that was out deer hunting in the Neches River, along the river, in some kind of a boggy back bayou thing, and he had this harrowing experience. This is what his father's friend had, and it just validated for Dave what he went through as an 11-year-old boy. And this experience was not, he wasn't chased by this thing, it didn't try to attack him, it wasn't circling his tent. We've heard all kinds of stories about these things. He wasn't even sure if it even saw him, but yet this experience was so powerful for Dave that it's haunted him for his whole life since then. Certain levels, and obviously he's not living in fear, but it comes back and it comes and goes and things. And he said that he always wondered what would have happened if he had just turned his head and looked directly at it. That's what he said. And who knows what would have happened, how the thing would have reacted, what might have happened. Also, if his father, just a few minutes later, walking up on him, and had this thing been here and his father coming in from the other side of the tree, he could have been right in the middle. Who knows what would have happened. But just this thoughts, ruminate in his mind about his experience he had in East Texas in 1971. And that is our story, and more kind of about his overall life experience after his story. Really, again, really interesting the process that people go through. And they're literally trying to process all of this when they go through one of these experiences, or a few of them. So that is my story for tonight, you guys. It's nice being back in the studio, especially when the weather is not working for me. And I really appreciate you guys. If you guys like stories about the strange, unexplained, and things that go bump in the night, you guys know what to do. Like and subscribe. I always appreciate your comments. Always really good comments. I really value that. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. As always, keep hiking.